Got our friend here, Don Khongmaly. If you don't know him, and you live in Des Moines, you're missing out. No excuse for that.
No, we know a lot of people, don't we, Dan?
Yeah, that's true, Don. Yeah, I mean, it's such an important time that we're living in right now, and I'm sure you're real busy, right, Don?
It is. It's helping, especially with the windstorms that came through Iowa.
Yeah.
The importance of that, not just American Family, but most carriers. We had over 7,500 claims in that one day event in the state of Iowa, and that's the largest single claims event in our company history in the last 10 years. So I mean, if you know the significance of that, and that's what we're here for, to help take care of our customers when it happens, So it was a little nutty for about 3-4 weeks, and we're still working to clean things up because so many contractors are behind. They don't have materials. If you try to look for shingles for your house and want a specific color, good luck. You got to give these guys 3-4 different colors to have an option right now, because they just can't get the material just because of the volume of need,
Anyhow, we have a very exciting topic that we're going to talk about today, and we've got our special guest and a friend, Don Khongmaly, joining us today. We got a lot of good information jam-packed in a Q&A type of format. We love to do those with our guest speakers, and worked out great. So that's what we'll do today. Don, he's our guy today. And I just want you to briefly introduce yourself and American Family Insurance to all of our attendees today.
Okay. My name is Don Khongmaly. I'm an agent at American Family Insurance. I've been an agent for these folks for about 15 years now, and have worked closely with Community CPA, with the startup of IES, and many other things. So we are good friends, and we work together to make sure to help everybody get taken care of insurance-wise. American Family is what they call a super regional carrier. So we are mainly in the Midwest with some access to the East Coast, like Georgia, and we've got a couple operating states and out west too. American Family has grown in size double in the last 5 years. So we bought companies like the General Insurance, we bought Meadville, we bought several other startups that's basically enlarging our footprint to where it's almost nationwide now. So we're looking forward to the growth. We've got our growing pains just like any other company that goes through the growth spurts that we have, but great organization, and hope we could share a lot of data. If you folks have any questions in regards to your personal, your home, auto, small business, that's our specialty. We do life insurance as well. So most of your needs we're going to be able to take care of. You have questions, and my information's here, and it'll be at the end too, just in case you guys have questions, want to call me directly, feel free to, okay?
Yes. Don is super guy. If you don't know him already, you definitely want to. So take a screenshot. I'll show this slide again at the end, but we're going to talk a little bit about insurance. We talk a little bit about small businesses. So those are some things that Don mentioned earlier. But all right, Don, here's our first question. So what must one consider as folks outweigh their options when it comes to insurance for a small business? What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of options out there, and it's just like buying a house or a car. You could get a basic level coverage that give you the basic necessities, but then if you want a nice car, you've got to pay for the extra bells and whistles. You've got to pay for heated seats, air conditioning. The same thing with business coverage. And today what we're going to go over is several key points. Again, this is a high-level overview, so this is just a surface level. The most important one is your business owner's coverage, stuff like your building, your liability. And then we'll get into details about, how you staff your workforce. Are you hiring as employees and subcontractors? Today we're going to kind of focus on the smaller business, like a nail shop. I'm going to use it as an example. If you have employees, workman's comp, we'll walk through that. And then, more for employees, employment practices. That takes care of the employer if we did something wrong. So those are some of the key things that I think people often get in a hurry, overlook, and not necessarily get the right coverage. And hopefully we could spark a lot of questions and help people understand and maybe look at their own business, say, hey, do we have the right coverage in place? Maybe we need to look at things, because you should be reviewing as your business grows every 1-2 years at the longest. So talk to your insurance guys, and if you don't know who insurance guy is, that's a problem. So all right, next slide.
Yeah, and that's true, Don. I mean, so what all do you think is included in the owner's coverage?
The business owner's coverage has a couple pieces. And the first part that most of us, we could feel things, and what we need to cover is the building and then the content of what's inside our building. So if you own a building or even lease, you got to understand your contract. So the first slide you're going to see is it's got a
I love
car.
that picture too.
It's got a car going through the window, and some people might think, I lease this space, I don't have to insure anything, But if you read your contract, most shops in a retail space, you're responsible for covering that glass, that frontage area, your signs, and depending on your lease, you might even be responsible for covering the interior space, even though you leased it existing. The owners of the building can make you responsible for covering the build out. So, you see the walls on that second picture. Anything that's permanently installed in the building, if you're responsible for the coverage, you've got to have insurance on it, including the stuff that's used to maintain and service the building. So if you want to move to the next slide, this is something that a lot of people miss too. Outside of the structure of the building, that we're responsible for, people also worry about covering what they paid for to run their operations. In the example that we're using for small businesses, the nail salons that are common in our community, we got to buy the chairs, we've got to buy the dryers, we've got to buy all these things, and a lot of times businesses are purchased privately, so you're not paying full price for the items. You're buying an existing nail salon for $30,000 that's equipped with everything. The important thing when you're looking at insurance, when you're insuring the personal properties, we look at insurance two ways. We can insure it for the actual cash value, meaning just what it's worth today. But to us, what we're worried about from insurance perspective, from the management side and risk perspective side, we want to help you be able to, if there's a loss, meaning if there's a fire or water damage from our sprinklers going off, all that stuff is going to be damaged to the point where it might not be salvageable. At that point, you're going to have to go buy brand new stuff. When you bought your shop or equipment, you might have got a good deal on used or existing stuff, but when there's a fire, that stuff might not be available. So most insurance policies do have a penalty clause. So on your business personal property, it does require that you insure your property, your business property, your furniture, your chair, your computer, that stuff at 100% value of the property if you're insuring for replacement costs. If you're looking at only at actual cash value, meaning what it's worth depreciated, that insurance value has to be at least 80% of the actual cash value. So for example on that, if you have $100,000 worth of equipment and you only insure $25,000 and there's a claim, a total loss, they're going to give you the 25% and penalize you at a prorated amount if you're not, because you're only insured at 25 versus 100,000. So there's penalties there, and people don't get too detailed about that. Most of your insurance folks are not going to know what you have, so it is your responsibility as a business owner to share that data and know the value of what you have. Okay, so.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned fire. I mean, I just, on top of my head, I know a few restaurants that maybe caught on fire. One in Washington, and one in Iowa, and insurance coverage really determines whether they come back stronger with a renovated restaurant after the fire with, proper insurance coverage, or they shut down and they don't have a way to come back because they didn't have everything covered properly. So
Yep.
it's so crucial for small businesses to have that properly documented. And speaking of losses and having those covered, like in what instances are losses covered, and how do we know the exclusions done?
Yep. So you could look at, and you could pick what type of coverage you want. The most broadest forms of coverage that we have is the first one is risk of direct perils. This basically means that everything is covered except what is specifically excluded in the policy verbiage. And every policy, when you look at an insurance policy and talk to your agent, you have got to ask them. Otherwise, they're just going to give you the cheapest price. And that's what a lot of agents lead by. The folks that don't really understand their client base, they're going to lead by pricing. And they might possibly give you the second form of coverage, which is named peril. So named peril basically says this loss is only covered if you have a fire, a lightning, explosion, wind and hail. So if that damage, the cause of the loss, is not listed, you're not covered. So water pipe breaks, that's not covered. So when you're looking at your policy, you wanna make sure if you could afford it, because there is price differences between risk of direct perils versus risk of named perils. You're getting a small savings, but you're giving up so much more in terms of broad coverage. So most of my clients do have risk of direct peril just because it's broader, and some of the exclusions we'll cover a few more slides down. So, but yeah, your insurance policy covers a lot of things, but there's still things that we can't imagine and think of. But most business policies that are packaged, called business owners policy, will include business income. Meaning if your restaurant is on fire and it takes 3-4 months to rebuild, or 6 months, we're going to help you replace that income, but it's got to be documented what your sales were. Extra expenses to keep running. Let's say partial loss and you've got to hire extra staff, you got to bring in this extra equipment. We're going to help with all that. Yep. Some of the other things include inflation, seasonal increases. People with like floral shops, there's seasonal business spike 100%, and a lot of other things, electronic data, accounts receivable. In a fire or water damage, you could lose a lot of that documentation, and our policies will help pay to recreate those documents so you could invoice your clients. Other things like personal property. So there's a lot of things that that comes with the package, but it doesn't cover everything. The best thing to do is ask ask your agent, make sure you communicate what your concerns are, so that if it is not part of the basic package, that it is, if they could find a way to include it. So if we want to go,
question for you: can people contact you to have you to review just what they got? I mean, is that something you guys offer?
Yeah, definitely, and we welcome that anytime. I mean, a lot of times the best way to do that is if you actually have a copy of your policy. That's the best thing for me to see, is what's in the documentation, because there's agents that are doing this 10, 20, 30 years that don't understand what they're doing, even within American Family and elsewhere. All companies have great agents and great representatives, and we're the same way. So if you've got an agent that's at Farmers, and I know I've got friends at Farmers, I've got friends at State Farm, they're great agents, but at the same time, there's agents that aren't just so well. So the best thing to do, if you would like me to look at it, and I'd welcome it, get a copy of your policy, call me, email me, and walk through that, and then I could help you, look at what's missing, and if there's recommendations that we have, we could go through that and help make sure that we do protect your business properly.
That's great. That's
good
great
question,
to know.
Dan.
That's great to know. Hey, Don, so our fourth question is, if there are more things that someone wants covered in their business, like what are their options to buy?
So outside of the business policy, there's a lot of things that you have to purchase, meaning pay for it, Just like the accessories, the options when you're buying a vehicle. You know, you want the heated seat. It doesn't come free. You want that T-top. It doesn't come free. So the business policy is almost the same thing. Outdoor signs, people buy those. They don't, you know, if you don't tell your agent about that and the storm comes through and rips off your $8,000 sign, there's no coverage for it. When you're building, let's say you're starting up a new business and you're building your store, you've got to have specific risk for that liability that covers, you know, the construction, the material that's laying out in the open. People are surprised that materials get stolen off a job site. I don't know if anybody's looked at the price of 2x4 lately. It's almost $4 or $5 a piece, and that's, you know, normally it's about $2. So there's a lot of things. If you have employees, employee dishonesty, they steal money, fraud, that type of stuff. You got to have that coverage. Money and securities, you know, cash, anything of value, you gotta add that. If you have a business that's got food or something that needs refrigeration, spoilage, you've got to buy that coverage. You know, on a personal side, when we had that DeRocher, how many people lost power? So I imagine there's quite a few people that lost power. Yeah, for business insurance, you have to purchase what they call utility service. So if there's damage away from the building, you know, that let's say the power station shut down because a tornado hit, there's no power and it causes damage to your house. If you don't purchase the insurance for utility service for water, sewer, and electrical, you could be without that coverage because it's an option. It's not part of the package. Right. Earthquake, we're pretty safe in Iowa, but certain areas, earthquake, you do have to buy it. You know, it's not part of your home or part of your business policy. And then the one thing that I see happen a lot is people overlook that when they're leasing or owning, it doesn't matter. The water that backs up from your drain holes or your sewer, it's not covered unless you purchase that option, and that's probably the third largest loss of cause in Iowa is water backup. So and people miss that a lot. So okay, so those are some things that it goes deeper, Dan, but these are just some of the common things that I see that people miss because they don't know what they're looking for. Yeah,
and I know you listed employee here. Employees are huge for small business. And I know our next question is related to employees and some subcontractors.
Yes.
Like, what do you do when you have employees versus subcontractors, and what are some of the insurance considerations you think someone who has an employee or a contractor?
You know, this is a great question, and because of the small business aspects, and we're using the nail shop as an example, I wanted to kind of go over this. Most general liability insurance does not cover injuries arising to your employees. So that definition of an employee or contractor makes a big difference in what your insurance needs might require. So your general liability, your business insurance will cover people, our guests, not our employees. So if our guests, our clients come into my office or community CPA and they trip and fall on our sidewalks or something, there's coverage underneath our business policy for that. But if you, Dan, as an employee, come to community CPA, gets hurt, the business policy won't cover that. They have to have workman's comp. So versus a contractor, if a contractor, comes in to do work on the building, we're hiring them as a contractor. There's no coverage for them when on our building. So, but the courts in the state of Iowa and most courts, they look at employees. They have a litmus test that says, hey, what's the criteria that we use to consider somebody an employee? The first one is if the employer, the business owner, has control of the worker's duties. So if you're telling your employees, hey, this is what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, that's one of them. If you pay your workers wages or salary, that's one of the definitions. If somebody even on a salary person, we're still employees. Okay, contractors are usually commission based, per job based, that type of stuff. Another one is if you could hire somebody, fire somebody, and the most important part is discipline them. So if you can take corrective action with your workforce, they're likely going to be your employees, you know. And if the workers are performing the duties, the fourth one, to accomplish the goals of the employer, typically they're going to be an employee. Okay. So we want to go to the next slide. Subcontractors. So this is really a big deal. And for small business like the nail salon, I know we have a lot of people that are workers that are subcontractors, meaning they operate on their own business, and we're 1099 them as a business owner. So we're paying them as contractors. A subcontractor, basically somebody who runs their own business. You know, they operate on their own terms, they set their own hours, they complete the task the way they seem fit, and they also do it with their own tools and equipment. So this is where those things that almost mirrors the 4 questions on what's an employee. So for a subcontractor, they basically operate on their own time. If you own a business to where you have subcontractors, they should have your subcontractors should have their own general liability. To protect yourself, you should have a copy of their general liability if they are working as a subcontractor for you on any basis, whether one job or working for you year round as a contractor. So, one of the things that we do see in court is if you've got a contract and you're telling them everything, how to do their job, it blends into court that even though you've got a contract in place, it doesn't hold up. So
yeah,
hopefully that's good. Yeah.
That's a big issue when it comes to, differentiating an employee versus a subcontractor. Sometimes you can get audited for that, and then you try to tell them, oh no, they're 1099, and they're coming back, the state's coming back and telling you, no, they were your employees. Who are you kidding? Right?
You see that a lot. You see that a lot, and if we have time, we'll dive into a case that isn't so small, and I think you'll be surprised, but we'll try to catch up on that end. But we got a lot of stuff to go through.
Yeah, and Don, we want to invite you again if we want to do case studies, and I think that'll be definitely something people could relate to better. So yeah, I think we can just scheme through the surface level of the questions that people would have generally, and then maybe we can dive into case studies another session.
Definitely.
To catch up on that, So following the previous question, we got a thought, like what about workers' comp for employees versus subcontractors? Is there a difference?
Definitely. So if you have employees in Iowa, employers are required by law to provide workers' compensation for their employees, and what that's going to cover is if they're working and they're injured on the job, the employer with their workers' comp is protected by law just to that extent. So that workman's comp will cover them to cover the injuries of the employees, so it's not coming out of the employer's personal expense. So they're basically paying into a pool for that. They also, if the employees are hurt, the money comes from that pool and not your employer. So it helps shields a lot of the damages, because if somebody's hurt and has medical bills, it could ruin an employer if they don't have this coverage. There's also criminal and civil penalties. If somebody has employees, it's a misdemeanor, I think, or second-degree felony if an employer has employees and they don't have workman's comp. So there's criminal and civil penalties that impose for people that are violating those laws. One thing that I want to circle back to is, just because you have a contract that says somebody is a contractor in place, and just because you 1099 somebody, so a person with a bona fide independent contractor are not employees. However, a contract that designates the person as an independent contractor does not make a person an independent contractor if they perform functions as employees. So basically, So just because you have a contract in place and 1099 somebody, but you're still acting as their boss,
Yeah.
courts could come back and say, hey, they're your employees because you tell them how to do everything. So that how we operate, we basically have to walk the talk and talk the walk, to separate the line between employees and contractor.
That's true.
One thing that as an employer, and if we have employees, especially, if we've got a diverse work group, one of the biggest consideration that people overlook is what they call employment practice liability insurance. It's more referred to as EPLI as a common term, but what this insurance is, and you have to buy it separate. It's not part of your business owner's policy. It protects your business, the employer, from allegations of employment through discrimination, wrongful termination, or if you're cultivating a hostile work environment. Ellen DeGeneres, her show is made a lot of news because she's cultivated a hostile work environment, and there's lawsuits that are related to that. And that's entertainment, that's big time news, but this could happen for a small business. Let's say you have an environment where you own a small business and you employ one of your family members, and people could see that, you're creating discrimination, and you're cultivating a hostile environment because you're favoring one person not for their merits but because of specific reasons. So if you were to be sued for that, or if you fired somebody for the wrong reason because they don't like tofu and you're a steak and potato guys, and you get into heated detail and you fire somebody over something wrong, they could sue you. Your business policy will not cover that. You have to have this EPLI, employer practice liability insurance. Okay. Some business policy, Dan, does offer in the recent years, because this has been such a big problem. Some policies do have a small sliver of coverage on the EPLI. I think 50 or 100,000. But that, in a bad lawsuit, that'll eat it up. So it's really not enough. If you do have a bigger workforce or diversity, I would highly encourage you to consider it. 5 people, 10 people. You need to look at this if you do have a staff that big. So. Yeah,
I can see how this would be a really important step for a small business to have. With if you have a couple of employees, you don't want to take these things for granted. As long as your general business coverage doesn't have that, you just take the initiative and ask. To make sure that everything you want is really covered. And it's Don's job. So, take this picture right now and make sure you ask him if you guys have additional questions, right?
Yeah. One thing is the business policy covers a lot of things. It takes communication from the business owners with the insurance agent, and hopefully the agent's asking a lot of questions, because if they don't ask questions and give you a price in 5 minutes or an hour, there's something wrong, because they don't know anything about your business. So that's
right.
the key thing. So,
Don, thank you so much for your time today and making yourself available.
You bet. It's always a pleasure, Dan. And if you guys ever have any questions, feel free to give me a call, email, drop me a line. And if you want to go through Community CPA as a channel, any way, I'd be glad to walk you through. Worst case scenario, we could tell you you're good, and if something is wrong, we can help fix those gaps.